My name is Ryan Amari. The world you are familiar with may soon be completely changed by what I have created. It all started with a drop of black liquid slipping into my eyes. My world immediately began to deform, with a low-frequency rhythm like a heartbeat ringing in my ears. Images intertwined with blue and green flipped like a kaleidoscope, and finally froze and framed an isolated bridge on the sea surface. That was a certain entrance deep in my memory, and also the door to another life. Gia Rude and I sat on the beach wearing black diving suits. I asked him if he wanted to go into the water again. He shook his head and said if I planned to stay here forever. But when I took out my diving goggles and fins, he finally smiled and agreed. I remember the feeling of crossing the clear sea together, that kind of freedom and tranquility, so real that you forget to breathe. But all of this is not real. This is just a test of other life. I opened my eyes and saw black liquid slipping from my right eye, surrounded by empty droppers. I sat on the floor, everything still. There are still 6 days and a few hours until the system goes online. I used to be an academic top student with clear logic and meticulous planning. I am the kind of person who writes code as naturally as breathing. I believe that everything can be explained by reason and data. Even human consciousness is just a complex set of neural signals. But 4 years ago, an accident disrupted all this order. Until 4 years ago, an accident changed my life. That day, my younger brother Gia Rude and I went diving together. The sea was as clear as unwritten paper, and we swam under the sea. However, just as I turned to look at him, he suddenly disappeared. I searched frantically in the water until I saw him floating on the surface like a quiet shadow. I desperately dragged him ashore and did everything I could, but he never woke up again. Since then, his body has been maintained, but his soul seems to have been taken away by the sea forever. People say it was a drowning accident, but I am unwilling to accept this definition. For me, it was not an end, but a pause. He is still somewhere, just unable to return. Since then, my life has deviated from the established track. I went from a genius in the laboratory to a stubborn weirdo, devoting all my time to a project that almost no one could understand. On the day of the interview, they asked me to talk about my research motivation. I answered their questions truthfully, without embellishment or concealment. I said that my younger brother is still alive, just trapped, and I am trying to find a way to save him. They don't understand other life. They thought I was making some new type of anesthetic or a mind control drug, but I told them that other life is not a drug, but a biological software. It doesn't change reality, but creates memories. A complete subjective experience that can be injected into the brain and take effect immediately. For the brain, that memory is as if it really happened. Pain, time passing, mood swings, everything is incredibly realistic. But I'm not doing this for the market, not for profit. I just want to find a way to let Gia Rude, who is trapped in the abyss of unconsciousness, see the light, see me, even if it's just for a moment. They cannot understand me. What they see is danger, instability, and potential manipulation. They cannot see my motives, nor do they understand the pain of losing loved ones and being powerless. But I don't need their understanding. I just need one chance to bring him back. I use it to simulate adventures, travel, and even a perfect skiing day. I fall and start over during the experience, falling into an infinite cycle until Byron pulls me out. The outside world has only been a few minutes, but I have experienced a full 6 days inside. This is just a code problem. I always say that. As long as it's fixed, it can be put back online. Company partner Shan Mu cares about its profits, and he introduces to buyers that other life is a free time that can be purchased. With a lunch break, you can experience life once, but I didn't develop it to make money. I tried to use it to wake Gia Rude up. I set up a brainwave reading device and dripped the black liquid into his eyes again. His eyelids twitched, and I thought I saw hope, but the nurse said it was just a normal muscle reaction. I went back to work without sleep. Byron asked me how many tests I had done. I said 42 times. In someone else's day, I had passed 20 days. I even forgot about my appointment with Danny and could only apologize to him. But he still came and sent me a report while I was working overtime. It was the data Shan Mu wanted about long-term use of other life. Obviously, they started the development of the imprisonment application behind my back. I refuse to let other life become a prison, but they don't listen. That day, Danny came to my house. With his usual curiosity and perhaps a bit of ostentatious ease, he didn't see other life as anything dangerous as usual. He always felt that we were creating future entertainment, not touching the boundaries of human consciousness. He picked up the new equipment on the table and was eager to try it out like a child. He thought it was a skiing experience, but he accidentally absorbed the swimming simulation I designed for Jared, the feeling of oppression and suffocation in the sea where he had an accident. I wanted to use that program to stimulate his brain nerves and awaken some hidden physiological memory, but it wasn't for anyone else. He started convulsing and fell in front of me. That scene was like a replay of the moment when Gia Ruid had an accident, only this time it was Danny. I called an ambulance, but it was too late. The following days were like an illusion. Interrogation, investigation, accusation. Every word pierced my exhausted brain like a needle. The legal advisor said that I was responsible for his death no matter what the original intention was. I understood that it was not a responsibility that could be erased by the explanation of the accident. Danny died, and the reason was that I did not protect other life well. I thought they would send me to jail, and I was ready to accept it. But Shanmu came instead. He said he had a proposal, a new form of punishment. He asked me to imprison myself with other life. For a year, a single-person consciousness simulation. No one talking to me, no scenery to see, everything created by my heart, like a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. He said it was more substantial than prison, spending a whole year in the mind, only a minute passing in reality. But the time of psychological perception is a complete 365 days. He looked at me with a tone without any pity. You killed someone, Lion. You must bear the consequences. At that moment, I realized that this technology could be used to create freedom, but also to create the most thorough prison. And I am the one who personally created this prison. I didn't argue or plead, I just nodded. I agreed. They initiated the program. Time setting, 1 year, 365 days. I thought I was ready, but when I woke up, my consciousness seemed to be dragged up from the bottom of the water, and I was suddenly thrown into some kind of cold and silent hell. It was a closed space with smooth and seamless white walls, as if even the air was sealed off. There were no windows, no clocks, only a digital panel on the wall, shining with a dazzling red light. 001. There are only a few things in the room: a mattress fixed to the floor, a metal toilet, a small automatic opening on the wall, spitting out monotonous nutrient blocks every day, a pen, a writing board. There is also a low-frequency electronic buzzing that has been hovering in my ears, like a trapped animal that refuses to disperse. Every morning, the number jumps once. 002, 003, 004. At first, I forced myself to establish a rhythm, getting up, exercising, eating, writing, meditating. I wrote down the days on a board and timed them with underscores, but on the 50th day, the 60th day, I began to forget my voice, the color of the sunlight, and even that I used to be a scientist and a sister. I began to speak to the air. I began to ask myself questions I had never thought of before. If I die in this room, will my consciousness not be able to dissipate? If I live here forever, does that mean this place is real? On the 80th night, I dreamed of Jared. He was lying underwater, looking at me with his eyes open and saying, "I don't want to go in the water anymore." But as soon as the dream turned, I saw myself holding his hand and pushing him into the ocean. That was the regret deep in my memory, gradually emerging, expanding, and eroding my rationality in this lonely prison. After that, my spirit began to collapse. My sense of time was confused, and day and night were mixed together. I even began to wonder if anyone had forgotten whether I was still inside. I imagined that people outside continued to eat, fall in love, and release products, while I was like a ghost, abandoned in my own invention. Finally, the 365th day has arrived. The panel numbers reset to 0, and I closed my eyes, thinking that I would be awakened and that this hell had finally ended. But when I opened my eyes again, the wall prominently displayed 001. I froze. I thought it was a visual error. I opened my eyes again. 001. Impossible. I started screaming, shouting, smashing walls, floors, and the writing board with my hands. All rationality evaporated in an instant. I bit the skin on my hands like a beast, just to feel the pain still exists. Until a certain moment, I heard the sound of the wind. A faint, real sound of wind, not a simulated radio wave. At that moment, I felt as if I had been struck by lightning. I rushed towards the food delivery hole and used all my strength to peel off the metal behind it. Behind the plastic film, there was darkness. Real darkness, not the light ratio constructed by the program. I drilled in, tore my hands, tore off the layer of cage shell stuck to my body, and crawled out. I sat on the floor of a warehouse, which was dilapidated and empty, with wires scattered and the air mixed with the smell of dust and oil stains. At that moment, I realized this whole year is not just virtual. I was really imprisoned. I have really been forgotten. When I walked out of the warehouse, the sunlight almost burned through me. The world did not pause for a second for me. Traffic flowed in the river, billboards flickered, and pedestrians passed by. Other Life has been officially launched and has become a popular consciousness technology in the market. And I have become a missing person. Some people say that I spent the past year in Italy with pictures, itineraries, and visa records as if the warehouse never existed. I called the police, but they couldn't find any record of my punishment. That process and decision were erased. The company has long been empty. Danny is still alive. Sam saved him, but also promoted my mistake. He became a hero, and I became an abandoned child. And Byron, he is still standing next to Sam, standing in front of the media camera, continuing to tell the story of how Other Life changes humanity. At this moment, I finally understand they are not creating the future, but controlling reality. And I must do something to bring the truth back. I knew I couldn't give up. I found my dad. He was the only one who still cared about Gia Ruid. We discussed morality, science, and humanity. I told him that my simulation gave Gia Ruid a choice, to live or to sink. He might wake up if he wanted to. I finally completed the simulation program and went to the hospital. Gia Ruid really opened his eyes, but after a moment, he began to twitch uncontrollably. I cried and unplugged the device. I don't know if he really woke up, but I know he would rather stay in his dreams. Then I began to doubt, have I always been in Other Life? I returned to the beach, saw the waves, and walked in. The waves transformed into a red kaleidoscope and everything collapsed. I woke up in the testing room, beat up Sam, and tried to destroy the device. They interrogated me and asked me why I developed this technology. I said, I want to give people a special opportunity, a life they never had before. The company approved the product launch. I quit the company, kept the patent, and just wanted to find myself again. But Sean Moo refused to let go. He locked me up in that imprisonment simulation, allowing me to spend those 365 plus 1 days again. But this time, I found an exit. After I woke up, the first thing I did was to let him taste the feeling of being forgotten, imprisoned, and devoured by the system's indifference. I pushed Sam into the experience. He once vowed that it was just a substitute punishment, an illusion woven by numbers, just for a few minutes. But I know that it's not an illusion, it's another form of reality, a reality that can destroy people's spirits. I watched him being swallowed up by the device. His body stiffened, and then he sank into the program. There was no struggle, no farewell, just like what he did to me in the first place. The experience I set up has no torture, no intimidation, only loneliness. A small room enclosed on all sides, 365 days, accumulating the despair of no response, day by day. I sat outside the test room, waiting quietly for him to come back. 1 day, 2 days, only a few minutes in reality. When he opened his eyes were bloodshot, his face was gray, and his lips were trembling. He tried to speak, but could only make vague sounds like an aphasic patient. Finally, he broke down and cried. Not anger, not repentance, but naked fear and weakness, like a child who has lost his mother. I didn't say anything, just stood up. Byron stood by the door, looking at me with complex eyes. He used to be Sam's most steadfast follower, but at this moment, he just remained silent, like a person who finally saw the truth. I said to him, "Let's go." He nodded, and we left together. Later, my father and I went to the hospital to see off Jared. The sun was shining brightly that day, and the ward was almost warm. Jared was still lying there, breathing shallowly, like the tide coming in and out. His eyes didn't open again, but I knew he had been to that world, that quiet, clean other life that belonged to him.